Nice. First technical difficulty of the night. I was chatting away to myself there on mute. Standard. So welcome everyone to our webinar this evening. We're going to be kicking off in 1 or 2 minutes. This webinar is being recorded for future use. You know, there's a lot of really valuable information being given out tonight and being shared tonight. So you'll have access to this afterwards. We'll send a follow-up email with this with a copy of the presentation, then a link to the recording as well. And then we'll just give it 1 more minute and we'll kick off. Okay, well, we'll kick off. So you're all so welcome to our inaugural joint event, hosted by our 3 sustainable energy communities right here in Dublin 7. So Connecting-Cabra, the group that I'm part of, Phibsboro in Stoneybatter, and then Phibsboro Village Climate Club. I'm absolutely delighted to present tonight's speakers, who are already turning sunlight into savings in our community. First, we'll have Steph and her cottage in Stoneybatter. And then we'll have Celine talking about her own experience with solar panels, and she'll provide an overview of Dr. Jerry Wardell's expert research on solar panels right here in Phibsboro. Then we'll have Michelle and Owen discussing their houses in Cabra. And our final speaker, Ger Doherty, will enlighten us on solar panel grants and showcase a great example of solar mehel by another community right here in Dublin. Finally, we'll finish up with some questions and answers. So please pop your questions into the chat as we go along, and we'll answer them at the end. So before we just jump into that, I'd like to just introduce who we are and what is the Triple Sec, the group that we're calling ourselves. So we're voluntary groups in the communities of Cabra, Phibsboro, and Stoneybatter, and our focus is sustainable energy and other varied interests besides that you can find out on our website. And our goal is energy independence. We all want warm homes that we can afford to heat and don't cost a fortune to run. So we've come together to try and be part of the energy transition to make our homes warmer and then cheaper to heat. So on this slide here, energy efficiency, you know, a lot of talk about the energy transition or energy in general tends to be a lot of numbers, a lot of figures. It tends to be very complicated. But this slide here kind of just tells us what we already know, that our houses can cost a fortune to heat and they leak a lot of heat. They don't hold on to the heat very well. So loads of room for improvement across Cabra, Phibsboro, and Stoneybatter. So this project was started by a desire to come together and share our knowledge and share our experience to support and improve our communities, to make our homes warmer and more affordable to heat. And we're also being supported by the European Union Commission through this citizen-led renovation project. And this project aims to better support communities so we can be part of the energy transition. So I'd like to finish off just by saying that energy and electricity can be too expensive and too complicated. So we're here to cut through the technical language and provide you with some real experiences from locals, from your neighbours, right here in our communities. So enough of me. I'll hand you over to our first speaker, Steph from Stoneybatter. Take it away, Steph.
Thanks, Jared. Do you want to take me onto the first slide? Thank you. Okay, so yes, so I'm Steph. I live in Stoneybatter. I've lived here for about 25 years now, and I'm going to be talking to you about my experience with sort of traditional Stoneybatter cottage and solar here. As Jer says, so I'm involved in one of the local sustainable energy communities, so more snappily Cozybatter in Stoneybatter. So we're working to find out what our energy use is here in Stoneybatter, how we might reduce that energy use, and how we might move to more renewable energy sources. And so that's to save money, to make the buildings that we, live and work and study in more comfortable, and to help with climate change, which is a, increasing worry of mine. And if you want to get hold of us directly at Cozybatter, it's cozybatter@gmail.com. And we're also on Instagram and Twitter at Cozybatter as well. So yeah, so if you could give me the next slide, please, Ger. Thank you. So yeah, so as I said, so I'm going to talk to you very briefly about this, my experience with solar PV in what's a very typical Stoneybatter cottage. And, you'll also see these cottages, I know, elsewhere in other communities in Dublin, so built in the late 1800s. And in August 2021, I had this kind of basic, simple solar PV system installed. The roof is south-southwest facing, so that would seem sort of immediately good for capturing energy from the sun's light. But I know that somebody coming after me talking today is also going to be talking about east-west orientations and how those can also work well. So that, as I said, that's just the way this house faces. So this, if you're interested, this is a system of 4 380-watt panels. Now, of course, the advice would be to go and talk to, a number of different solar suppliers, and they will tell you, obviously prices and what they think is best for you. This is what I've ended up with. And I went with a company called Calder Solar. They were also doing at the same time a not similar system for my sister in Cabra, who some of you may have heard speak before. And they've also since, I think it was last year, they've now installed a similar system in a neighbour's house just a few doors down. And I have to say, just a big thing here is I've just been so happy with this. It's worked very well for me. So yeah, so if you could give me the next slide again, Ger, please. Thank you. I think one thing to say, because I'm conscious that just about everybody in Stoneybatter is living in pretty small conditions. It's worth saying the installation was really quick with minimal disruption. I think there were maybe about sort of 6 guys here, a couple of guys working inside on ladders. One poor guy had to go into the teeny tiny attic and fix things up there. And then there were a few other bits of electrics in the house. I now have an off button for the solar PV, which I've never had to use. I don't know what sort of situation I might need to, but anyway. And I also have a meter, which I can see in the house as well. And then you can see what it looked like when they were actually putting the panels on the roof there. So yeah, so it was all done in maybe 2 or 3 hours, and instantly this was this instantly started working. So this electricity being generated from the sun out there was instantly powering my fridge, charging my phone, etc., etc. So so that's all very, very simple. So that's great as well. And then onto the last slide, please, Ger. Thank you. Yeah, so, and I just wanted to leave you with one statistic. I know we're going to be sort of digging into, some more stats and figures and so on over the next slides, which is fantastic. I just wanted to leave you with this one. As I said, I had this generated in August 2021, and a lot has changed since then. Actually the grants and so on have changed, and obviously we're all aware that energy prices have been, a little bit all over the place over the last few years. But one thing, I can tell you is that, every year this particular solar system, so this is, a roof full of solar PV on a cottage, is generating 1,500 kilowatt hours each year. Now that personally would have meant well, probably not very much to me before I had this system put in. But if you have a look at your electricity bill, you can have a look and see how much electricity you're using and how a figure like that might actually work for you. Again, in this area, that's the kind of figure you can expect from that amount of solar. So yeah, so now I'm going to hand you over to Celine, who's going to tell you about solar in Phibsboro and give you some more facts and figures as well. Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much, Steph. Well, it's I said my name is Celine Riley. I'm with the Climate Club in Phibsboro Village, Tidy Towns. And originally, Dr. Jerry Wardell was going to do a presentation on his installation. He's away, so I'm going to do mine, and I'm going to give you an overview of Jerry's. And Jerry will be more than happy later if people want to communicate with him and get some more details on his, because he did a lot more detailed financial study. Okay, so I'll get started. If you want to move the slide on, Jerry, please. So as I said, yeah, Sailing Riley, Phibsboro, yeah, thank you very much. I'm not going to stay too long on this slide. It's just to let you know some of the stuff that we're doing in the Climate Club with the Phibsboro Village Tidy Towns. If you Google Phibsboro Village Tidy Towns, you'll get all this information, and I know they'll be circulated afterwards, but we will be delighted if anybody was interested in any of these initiatives or had any suggestions on initiatives we might start doing in Phibsboro to look at decarbonising and looking at the climate crisis. Next slide, please. Okay, so the context for the presentation for tonight. Our house is a mid-terrace, 3-bed red brick, south-facing rear roof with a very large Velux, with 2 full-time occupants, one working from home, one retired. Pre-solar, our electricity costs were just over 900 and using 2,664 units. And the gas was over 10,000 and almost 900 euros. So before my retirement, I was involved in climate action. So once I retired, I really wanted to look at how I might reduce my emissions, improve my energy efficiency, and just do something generally. So I thought, first of all, I would look at the one-stop shop, but that turned out to be just too expensive for us. So I thought, what would be the easiest thing to start with? And that seemed to be solar PV. So I checked the SEAI page for approved suppliers, and whilst there's loads of information on SEAI, really, there's just too many names. It's not useful in itself for looking for suppliers, really. So what was the most important was actually speaking with friends who had installations already. And one in particular, Noel, an engineer friend who actually had an Excel sheet with savings, payback times, ratings for suppliers, and loads of more stuff. So that was really useful for me. I also got a BER survey done. We're E1, which is pretty typical around here. Checked the bills, as I said. Went on Facebook. There's a really good Facebook site, Irish Solar Owners Group, which I still use actually. And after all of that, you can go back to the same slide again. I got 2 quotes. Both made site visits, and both actually were very good. But the decision was I went with Burn Energy, Aidan Byrne of Burn Energy, who he's very knowledgeable, he's very practical. He said he'd deal with the grant, and I just found him just very helpful and organised in the way he approached the installation. So the final thing was 5 panels, which is all we could fit, as you can see on the picture, and Eddy, which is a hot water diverter, and no battery because we don't have enough power to make that worthwhile. We paid a deposit up front of 25%. As I said, Aidan dealt with the grant, and the total we paid for our 5 panels was 3,820. A bit like Steph said, we had the roofers there for half a day, the electricians there for just over half a day, very, very little disruption. The electricians had to go to the attic to put the inverter in, connect it down to the fuse board, and put the Eddy in the hot press so that we could actually use it when there was excess power to heat the hot water and not have to use the gas. Okay, next one, please. Okay, that's just a summary of our technical information. The previous slide, you saw the PV panels, 5 375 watt panels. The inverter is what you will see there on the right-hand side of the slide. It's just to give you a sense of size. It's about 350 by 300 by maybe 6 inches out from the wall. The hot water, the Eddy, which is the one on the left-hand side, that's for the size again, would be maybe 200 by 200, maybe 4 inches out from the wall. The Harvey, which is the little thing below the kind of messy fuse board we have, facilitates wireless connection from the Eddy. The photo shoot of the kind of with those stickers on it is what we get from our app, that shows you instantaneously at that point in time we were generating 150 watts. It'll tell you what you are generating instantaneously. It'll tell you what you did for the day, for the week, for the month, the year, and since we've actually installed panels. So it's very useful. It's called a Solar Smart app, but whilst the information is great and there are lovely graphs on it, it goes down on me very frequently. So I'm not sure that there isn't perhaps a better app out there that maybe wouldn't be quite so up and down. But the information is there and we don't lose the information. It's just we can't always access it. And then shortly after we went solar, a DSB came along and installed a smart meter, which there's a lot of toing and froing about it because some people prefer to keep their old meter because it used to run backwards. So you actually get proper value when you actually sell power to the grid. But if you have a smart meter, obviously you get whatever rate the company you're with give you. But the good thing about it is you can actually go out and look at what you're generating, what you're sending back and stuff like that. Next slide, please, sir. The next slide, this just looks at the usage we've had since we've installed the PV and what kind we're generating, what power we're generating from it. So as I said before, solar we're just 2,664. Post solar we were using 1197. The gas pre-solar was over 10,000 and post solar over 4,000. Now that was quite unexpected to us. The average daily usage, if you look at your bills, you'll see that it gives you an average daily. So ours was 6.9 in winter before solar and 4.8 after. And in summer, it was 4.8 before and 2.6 after. The middle slide, or the middle photo, shows you what we generated in 2023, which is 1,480 kilowatts, not far off the generation that Steph was talking about. And on the left-hand side is what we've produced since we installed it, which is just over 3 megawatts. And on the right-hand side, I just put that in to show you, even in November, you are getting reasonable power on many of the days during the thing. So people often think there's no sun, but actually once there's light, you're getting solar. In terms of our bills, we went from 1,800 between gas and electricity before solar to 632 between the two after solar. We paid nothing in the ASB since May 2022. So is that all down to the PV? Probably not. It's there's behavioural changes we made. We definitely, like most people, I think, who install solar, monitor our usage much more. We get very excited by the fact that you're now powering your washing machine from the sun. We only use the high usage appliances when we have solar light. We didn't use the gas at all during the summer for heating our water because of the solar. We turn the eddy off when we go on holiday, so we get more going back into the grid. So I think it's very difficult to decide like what actually can you put down to your solar, but between all of them, we certainly have saved money. The next slide, please. So that's just a summary of the costs. As you see on the right-hand side, the graphs show you that we are definitely dropping our usage and our electricity bills since the 2021, 2022, 2023. The cost, as I said, was 3,820 to us for the 5 panels. The solar power displacing the grid import is just over 1,000 kilowatt hours between what we generated and what we sold back to the grid. So the value of the free power, I just estimated, this is not scientific, it's the rate I would have paid was 474, and the surplus energy sold back was 75, so about 550 between the two. So again, payback, how many years? People often talk about how long does it take to pay back, though generally they don't say how long does it take for the fridge to pay back or the TV to pay back, but people often ask for solar. And it's very difficult for me to say because obviously we had the solar savings that we talked about there. I have the lower gas bills. Now the lower gas bills could just as easily be to do with both the hot water, but also the fact that since then we've also upped our insulation to 300 in the attic and insulated below the floorboards and the floorboards in the hall and in the sitting room. So that has made a difference, obviously. And then there are the government credits. Okay, Jerry, if you want to go on. So just before I kind of finish up, then I'm just going to briefly look through Jerry Wardell's system. Because he has a very similar house, but it's east-west orientation, unlike mine, which was the south. So he got 16 between the two roofs. So even though you think south is good, obviously east-west was better in this instance. He's got the same as I have, like an inverter, apps, the eddy, and optimizers, which help if you've got shading. And the solar energy he generated was 4,625 in 2023. And as you can see from his bill, he's still in credit. Next, please, Jared. So his costs there, I'll go quickly through because I know I'm running out of time, I think. He paid just under 10,000 for his 16 panels. He says he would have saved about over 1,000 last year, giving him a rate of return of 10.4% per annum. He did a calculation on a net present value, which is something that a tool to use to see whether it's worthwhile investing in something. If you can get a positive NPV after at a particular discount rate, then it's worth investing. So as you can see, for both 4% and 6.5%, he has a positive reading. He just details his savings there, and the total savings, given all the other bits and pieces, would be 1,544, and he's still in credit at this stage. Okay, Jerry, if you want to move on there. And just to, very briefly to look at the reason I got into the solar panels in the first place was really to look at my greenhouse gas and energy efficiency. So in terms of that, each of the roofs that we have can do that. Jerry calculated that he saved 1.6 tons of CO2 last year. And he just gives you a little picture there of what the monthly solar energy was over the year, which is pretty much as you would expect. But, you know, you see a sunny May and a cloudy June, things happen. But, you know, everybody who puts up solar panels can actually save emissions and affect climate action. Last slide then, Jern, I'll be out of here. Okay, just some takeaways. It's worth getting solar even if you have not carried out other retrofitting measures. A lot of people say, I haven't done insulation, I need to do that first. You don't. You'll make savings straight away if you get the solar. It's worth getting even if you can only fit 5 panels or like Steph 4 panels. Even if you can 16, well, your quid's in and way better off. But if you can only fit 5, it's still well worth it. Grant and installation process, not complicated. I thought you can never underestimate the satisfaction and excitement you get from powering your washing machine and other appliances from the sun. And I know that's common to everybody I know who has solar. They just, the kick you get out of the fact that you're just getting it from the sun and you're not having fossil fuel emissions anymore. Even in winter, you get power from your panels. Even when you're away, they're working for you and sending power to the grid, especially if you turn your ready off when you're away. And I said, somebody said to me, will you do anything differently? I said, given our circumstances, probably not. I would love way more panels, and so if I could get them, I would in the morning. And then just finally, I suppose, again, just don't underestimate what each one of us can do. Any one of us can fit, if we can afford to fit any number of panels, you're doing something. You're actually security, energy security in the future, reducing emissions and saving yourself money. So thanks very much, and I'll hand you on to both Owen and Michelle now. Thanks, bye.
So, Michelle, do you want to take yourself off mute there? Pop your camera on. You can take it away. We'll take questions at the end of all the presentations. Okay, what we can do in the meantime is, Owen, are you okay to jump in? And then we can go back to Michelle afterwards, if that's all right.
Yeah, that's fine. If you can hear and see me okay.
Yeah, I can hear you, yeah, and see you now.
Great, thanks. Yeah, so if you'd move on to my slides, yeah, I can take over. Up one more. Oh, that's it. Yeah. Sorry, down. Okay. Hi everyone. My name is Owen. I'm living on Cabra Drive. I'm actually a neighbour of Steph's sister, whom she mentioned before. Yeah, far from the first person to get a solar PV installation on the street. And yeah, I've been sort of a peripheral member of Connecting-Cabra for a while now. So yeah, I'll just give you a quick overview of our situation and system. So it's a semi-detached house with a hip roof and sort of southwest facing at the rear. We also had a flat roof extension, which I was very happy that we could get panels onto. So I'll show pictures in a moment, but until we were able to install 11 panels, we went with Celtic Renewables, and we also got them to install a heat pump at the same time. So that was a combined project. I initially looked at going with a one-stop shop for this, which are more set up for like full retrofits and everything. Their quotes were exorbitant. They didn't seem to sit right. So I did a bit more research and found out that I could save a lot of money just by going with single measure grants with Celtic. It was more work for me, especially on the heat pump grant, but yeah, the savings were very significant versus House to Home's original quotes. So yeah, the house is now A2 rated. It had been B3 rated, so we'd had like installation and underfloor heating and windows and stuff put in before. and it was at B3, and the combination of the heat pump and the solar panels brought it to an A2 rating. We did not get a battery, but we did have a Zappi car charger, which is the same brand as the Eddy that diverts excess to the water. The Zappi diverts excess to the car if when it's plugged in. So that suited us. Between the electrification of the heat and the car, I didn't see the need for a battery. I was happy to just for any other excess to go to the grid. So yeah, I can move on, Jared, to the next slide. So on the cost benefit, we've only had it 6 months, so we haven't been through a full cycle, and also I'm not really following the app very well. And also it's hard to compare bills like for like because of the change in the heating and so on. But the cost, the panels themselves for the equipment and installation was 7,900. Unfortunately, they asked me did I want to use my own electrician. I said yes, which turned out to be a bad idea. But in any case, the additional cost there would have been roughly the same at around 1,200. And I'm just still waiting for the grant approval. I actually just got a note that my inspection will be soon. So I've been approved for the grant of 2,400 pending that inspection. So that turns out to be a net of 6,700. Just going off SEAI's website. So these numbers are like typical for Ireland. So 3 kilowatts, a 3 kilowatt system will generate roughly 2,600 kilowatts of electricity per year. So maybe 866 per 866 kilowatt hours per kilowatt. Which equates to about 4,000 kilowatts per hour per year. Sorry, 4,000 kilowatt hours per year for a 4.5 kilowatt system. And so at the feed-in tariff rate, that'll be 960 per year. So that's the absolute minimum, assuming we didn't use any of the electricity generated. And then sort of 1,600 would be the upper bound, assume we used all of it. So somewhere in between. So that's sort of the cost benefit. Then just, how they look. So there's we actually got only 5 panels on the main roof of the house, given the hip roof. And I was told I had to be half a meter from the boundary. So it's tempting to think you could slot another 1 or 2 in there. Maybe I will someday. But for now, that's how it's looking. The roof installation was very smooth. I never even saw the roofers. They just came while I was at work one day and left them. But that's because the electrics were being done separately. The electrics did take a few visits, but that was more down to the sort of inexperience of the person I was using. So those are facing southwest, but they're also tilted at a good angle. And then the next slide here, you can see the ones on the flat roof. So these are I hadn't envisaged how this would actually work, but they just have like these sort of special bins that are angled, and they just sit there, and they're all looped into the same system. So the 11 panels are looped, and then they go into the inverter. And in our case, the inverter is fitted on the outside of the building, which I'm not sure it's the best idea, but it's certainly, the specification of the machinery is suitable for outdoor installation. Because we have the freedom to point them wherever way, they're going directly south. So we get a bit of a blend of south and southwest, so that kind of spreads things out a bit over the course of the day. And that's really the last slide. Other than to say we're so far very happy. And I think, for example, I think the most excess we had in one day was enough to drive the car 80 kilometers. That was on top of what was used to power the house itself over that day. So that was quite nice. And as Celine said, I can just attest to the satisfaction of those kind of little things. So the payback period is kind of a bit of a guess, but certainly the value is there, and also the satisfaction is well worth it for us. That's it for me. Thank you, and thanks to the other speakers. Oh, I should also say that we did get a smart meter in very soon after the installation, so yeah, then we get the feed-in tariff of 24 cents per unit currently from electricity.
Great.
Which is about 60% of what we were paying, so it's not too bad.
Great. Thanks
Okay,
so much.
I'll mute and
Michelle, if you're there, do you want to unmute and talk us through? Brilliant. Thanks, Michelle. Take it away.
Hear me. So yeah, this is my house here with the 8 panels of on solar panels. You can see it's just, I suppose, typical mid-terrace house in Cabra, and this house is one of the originals built in the 1930s, so nearly 100 years old. As you can see there, just the house is facing east to west, so I do get a good bit of sunlight in the daytime, and then it moves around to the back in the evening, which may be an option for me at some stage, maybe even get more for the evening. So next slide there, Jer. So yeah, I just wanted to show this, kind of going back to how the house, when the house was built, it was only when the scaffolding was up and they were about to put the solar panels on that they realised there was no membrane. Even though I had insulation in the attic, there was no membrane under the roof tiles. So that posed a problem, having gone through the whole process of putting the scaffolding up. So we had to get a roofer in, take the tiles off, put the membrane, and it's only like, you know, a light film. It did add to the cost. It was like 1,500, but I got both sides done, and it just meant then that the solar panels were going to be safe, and there wasn't going to shift any of the tiles when they were on the roof. So it had to be done. There was no other option. So obviously a bit disappointing when they came to put up, even for them, because, you know, it takes a couple of hours to put the scaffolding up, but had to be done because of the way most houses, I suppose, in this era, all the tiles just literally fitted onto the rafters. Well, it's great for airflow, you know, it's had to be addressed for the solar panels. Yeah, next slide. So a bit like the panels that Celine has just shown, and I think actually Caldor did my panel as well as Stephanie's. Now I did have a bit of trouble with Caldor, but there was a guy there called Roy, and he was absolutely amazing. Only for him, he was brilliant. So he now actually has his own company. So if anybody was interested, I would certainly give you his contact details as opposed to Caldor, even though they were great at the time, but I did have a few little issues. But anyway, so this is the small panel up in the attic, and as you can see, it's not in any way invasive or doesn't take up much space, and you can see what you're generating and how it actually works, and it's very, very simple and very easy to, if there was any maintenance on it. So again, like Celine, there's a little kind of a panel in the hot press, and that would then convert the any unused energy into heating my water. And if I didn't have any energy there, I would be able to kind of boost it. It's just kind of a matter of pressing the button. And unlike the immersion where you leave it on for a few hours and you forget about it and you're in work and you're like, it is actually, you can put it on for 15 minutes or 30 minutes or 45, whatever, and you can actually program that on your phone as well to come on at a certain time, and whenever you want the hot water. So yeah, next slide, please. So again, as Celine said, this is the old meter. I chose not to upgrade into the smart meter, because this is no more than my lovely horse. This is my lovely meter. I absolutely love looking at my meter going backwards. I could spend hours looking at it, and I've taken videos and shown all my friends of how wonderful it is when the sun is shining, any time of the year, and my meter is going backwards. I have been asked if I want to change smart meter, and I haven't, because it just, you know, I did have the house upgraded in relation to the electricity, so I'm happy that it's safe and there's nothing you know, untoward having an old meter that's there. I'm not actually sure when that meter went in, but this is my grandmother's house, and I do, for as long as I remember, that meter is there since I was a child. So yeah, I did choose not to go with the new meter. So I don't imagine I'll ever want to change, because what happens is when my solar panels are creating energy, I kind of feel that I'm banking it. And, you know, I was asked did I want a battery on it, but the battery at the time, I have mine in since 2020, and the battery at the time was actually around 10,000, which I can't afford. So I kind of feel that I'm getting the best of both worlds here, in that I'm banking this electricity. And since then, I've actually taken out my gas central heating and converted it then in over to the electric heater. So all my heating is now run on electricity. So I'm hoping then, so you'll see by my next slide, if you want to move on there, Ger. I'm actually in credit, and this is just a very, very recent one. As you can see, I'm actually in credit because at the time I did have a bit of hassle with the ESB, in that they weren't recognising that I was generating my own electricity and it wasn't going onto the grid. So what they did for the first couple of bills was they were charging me as an estimate reading, and I did have a bit of hassle with that, but it soon got that sorted. And what they were doing then, and which they are doing, they're only charging me for 1 unit per bill, which means I'm generating electricity, it's kind of banking, and they're only charging me one unit, which means I actually don't have electricity bills, and I actually don't have gas bill now anymore. So as you can see, I'm in credit, and with the government's extra credits as well, it's still kind of being banked. So at the bottom of that slide there, it says minus 663. So that's how much I'm actually in credit. Now I guess I will be using a bit of that with my heating, but I'm hoping then what will happen is, you know, come summertime, even on Sunday there, it was a Sunday, Saturday, or one of the days anyway over the bank holiday, the sun was shining and it was going backwards still, even, you know, middle of winter. That I will generate my electricity, and I will kind of bank that then for the next coming winter. So that's my plan, really. So yeah, moving on. This is just, I suppose, a copy of the consumption. The right-hand side is what I had used, but that was just the estimated bill that they had said that I'd used. And you can see then November to January of this year, I've consumed actually nothing. So all good, I'd have to say. And as Celine had said, and Stephanie, like 5 panels, 4 panels, 8 panels, whatever, there's, you know, it's a no-brainer really for solar panels. If you go back to my first slide, you'll see that one kind of black kind of tube on the left-hand side, that's the electricity that's coming down from the solar panels and into my ESB box. And again, I'd say it was like a half a day, including putting the scaffolding up, half a day, and no dirt, no nothing. The lads were so good. They set it all up for me on my app, and I can see every day. And it's just like, it's like winning the lotto. You look at it every day and kind of go, yes, I'm creating money here. So absolutely super. Only positive to say about it. So, Sinead.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Michelle. Chair, we'll hand it over to yourself when you're ready.
Thanks, Chair. So I'm going to talk about grants, and I'm also, as Chair said, I'm going to talk a little bit about a group solar PV purchase initiative that's at the moment going on in Santry in their sustainable energy community. So I'm the mentor for sustainable energy communities in the Dublin City area, appointed by SEAI. So we'll take the next slide, please, Ger. So in terms of applying for the grant, and you get a copy of this presentation. So you can see there, if you click on the link that's there, it brings you to the page which is illustrated just below that link. And it's the solar electricity grant page on the SEAI website. And as it says, this grant will help you install solar photovoltaic panels on your home to generate renewable electricity. So the next page, please. Yeah, so the grants, they decreased slightly at the beginning of this year. And they were, you used to be able to get 2,400 for a maximum grant, and now it's 2,100. And I think the reason for that is that they, SEAI don't want to put big grant amounts into measures that kind of pay back very quickly, because they kind of figure that people maybe should be doing that with less grants. I suppose the incentive is already there, because as you hear from everybody, it kind of makes a lot of sense financially, as well as from a CO2 point of view. But so you get it's 800 per kilowatt hour peak, up to 2 kilowatt hour peak. So the kilowatt hour peak, what that means is the maximum amount of power that will come off your system, I suppose. And typically now, most modern panels will give you about 440, maybe certainly over 400 watts per of peak power. And what that means is that on a lovely summer's day in the middle of June or July or whatever, if they're facing south and they're on your roof, and your roof is about 35 degrees to 35 degrees angle, it will generate 400 watts. One of those panels will generate 400 to 450 watts at that particular moment. Now, obviously, as the sun travels across the sky, that goes down, and as the sun also through the winter, obviously that goes down. So this is the max that you're going to get out of each of your panels. That's what the kilowatt peak means. So typically in modern panels, it's now at about 400 to 450 watts is the peak power you would get off each of those panels. So if you put up five panels, that will give you that 2 kilowatt peak. So if you install 5 panels, you will get €1,600. And then if you go on and install some more, up to 4 kilowatt peak, which would in effect be the guts of 10 panels, or maybe 9 panels, you're going to get 2,100 of a grant. Next one, please, Ger. So on the website, you'll come across this. As you scroll down the page on the website, you'll come across this, and it says how to apply, and it has 7 steps in it. It starts off that you find and appoint a registered SEAI solar PV company. So these are all listed on the SEAI website. And I'll deal later with how you can find them. So you find and appoint a registered SEAI solar PV company. But so I'd recommend that you talk to people who have already done this and ask them what was their experience. Like, for instance, Burn Energy were mentioned, and Celtic Renewables were mentioned, and they were both very positive. And Caldor were mentioned, and that was partly positive, let's just say. Not 100%, but still there was positive. So so maybe talk to some of the people who've had solar panels, talk to some of your neighbors and ask them their experience, and then they recommend to get, it's a good idea to get 3 quotes from 3 reputable suppliers. And then you apply to SEAI for the grant offer online. I'll go through that in a few minutes. Then once you get the grant offer, you can actually tell the solar PV installer to go ahead. They will apply to ESB Networks to get approval for the connection that they have to make to your meter. Then they install the solar panels. After the solar panels are up and running, you get a BER. You need to get a BER done after the solar panels are up and running. And then once that's done, and the company submits the evidence of work to SEAI, then SEAI will process the claim. So typically, after you do your after you install the panels and you make the application, they should really be back to you within a couple of weeks, generally. Now, obviously, that isn't, for instance, Owen's experience. I don't know whether that was because you used your own electrician or something like that. Maybe that interfered with it, I'm not sure. We'll take the next slide, please, Chair. So the first stage is find and appoint a registered SEAI sort of PV company. They recommend to get 4 different quotes, but they have to be from the companies that are registered on the SEAI site. If you don't get one of the companies that are registered with SEAI, you won't get the grant. So research the company you've selected and look for references from them. But, you know, as I said, probably the best thing to do is to talk to your neighbors, and those who've had good experiences, take 3 of those and get quotes from them. And then get a contract from them, and then apply for the grant. Next page, please, Ger. So you apply for the grant, apply to SEAI for the grant. Don't start works until you receive the grant offer. If you've already started the works, they won't give you the grant. You have to get the grant approval before you assign the company, before they start doing the work in effect. Yeah, just double check that the company that is listed on your grant offer from SEAI is the company that you are, make sure that they match. And then if you go to the next slide, please, Ger. There's a page further down on the SEAI, it's all on the one page. You will come across a solar PV application guide. So if you click on the link, it'll bring you to that guide. You can download that guide and read it. I'll take the next page, please, Ger. And on that, the relevant stuff on that, there's a few points on there that's relevant. So just remember that it applies to dwellings built and occupied before 31st of December 2020. So if you're in a house, you know, from 2021 or 22 or 23, you can't avail of the scheme. The grant approver must be in place before you before they start the work, basically. The grant remains valid for 8 months from the date of issue of grant offer notification. So you must make sure that you get the job done and complete within the 8 months. That shouldn't be a problem, but just be careful that you don't kind of apply for the grant, get approval, and then say, oh, I'll do that later or after the holidays or after X, Y, Z. You know, just make sure that you've left yourself enough time. Have to get the BER post-works at the moment anyway. I'm not sure if that was always the case. The applicants, you have to apply to ESB networks for the connection to the electricity distribution system for a microgenerator. So you're in effect a microgenerator because you've got a little generation plant, electricity generation plant in effect on your roof, and you have to get permission from that. But the installer will generally do that rather than you having to do that. The installer must be on the solar PV scheme registered company list. The electrical works must be completed by a Safe Electric Ireland electrician, but that will be handled again by your installer. And then the declaration of works must be signed by the registered installer. Next one, please, Chair. And then the application process. Before you apply, you must have your MPRN. So that's the meter point reference number. Each ESB meter in everybody's home, the ESB networks own all of the meters that are installed in everybody's home around the country, and they all have an individual number. It's 11 digits long. It starts with a 1000 something, and you will see it on your electricity bill, whether that's an online bill or whether it's a paper bill. It's up in the top right hand corner of your bill, so you need to dig that out and have that ready when you're applying. You must know the year in which your house was built and occupied, and as mentioned, it must be prior to 2021. You will select your registered company in the application process. You will detail what the system to be installed is, in other words, what size it is, basically, how many panels and what kilowatt peak it is. And you need an email address if you're doing an online application. If you're not doing an online application, actually haven't seen that done, but I presume you print it off and post it into them. Next one, please, Chair. So to apply, you click on this is all on the one page. So you just travel down this page, which I showed you the link to at the start, and it's just step by step. And you click on apply now, and you get into this SEAI application portal. And if you haven't used it before for other grants, in fact, even if you have used for other grants, I think you still have to register separately for the solar PV grant, but I'm not 100% sure of that. So you click the register button, and next slide, please, Chair. Yeah, you click the register button and you have to put in your email address and you choose a password, and then they'll send you a verification code that you put in. It's all very easy, to be honest. And then you'll be registered. And then you get to the next page, which is your solar PV application. You put in your MPRN, which, as I mentioned, begins with a 1 and it's a number of zeros and then some other numbers after it, and it's on your electricity bill. And then if you click MPRN address, it'll just verify that they have the right address, that you have the right MPRN. If you don't have the right MPRN and it's giving you a different address, well, then you need to go back to look at your electricity bill because there's some sort of an issue there. Maybe you picked it up wrongly. Next page, please, Chair. Oh, that's questions already. Okay, I thought I had another couple of slides after that. But anyway, on that, there's another, there's a page on which you basically put in your address. You put in you've already put in MPRN, you put in your address, you put it in the name of the installer, and you put in the size of the system. And that's basically it. And generally, once you click on the send button, they will be back to you. I haven't actually applied for a solar PV grant yet. I will be doing so later this year, but I have applied for grants for other measures. I did external installation on my house about 1.5 years ago, and they came back within a couple of days with the approved grant. So that's it. So that's how you apply. And just to mention briefly about this solar MEHL idea. So the idea of this MEHL is the kind of working together idea, community working together. And what we're trying to do in Santry with the Santry Sustainable Energy Community is that there's a big estate there called the Royal Oak Estate, and there's about 350 houses or something in it, and they're all copycat houses. They're all they're all the same size roofs, and the vast majority of them have a roof. The main roof actually faces south or north, depending on whether it's the front of the house or the back of the house. So the idea is that I gave a presentation to them about 3 months ago, maybe end of October, and said, you know, we're thinking of going with this solar MEHL idea, whereby we get a group of houses that are interested in this, and we would approach a number of suppliers and see what level of discount they would get based on give based on the fact that these homeowners are getting this done as a group. And as a result, it should result in significant savings for the installation companies, because you know, rather than going to site and bringing equipment to site and going away to somewhere else in somewhere else in Dublin or wherever with other materials and other scaffolding, etc., it should be that they can put up the scaffolding in one house and then move it from one house to the next house. You know, they make one delivery to the area, the scaffolding just gets moved around, so they don't have them coming back and forth, etc. So the idea is that there will be significant, well, some savings there. Now, the savings, I don't know how much the savings are going to be. I know from a similar solar MEHL project that ran in Wicklow that the savings they got, they weren't huge. They were around 8%. But, you know, 8% of, 4,000 is, 320 quid. So it's not that small. So we're at the stage now where we have 13 homes, which all face the one way. So it's very easy to copycat on them, to just copy the system. And they're all using about the same amount of electricity. None of them have heat pumps. None of them have electric vehicles. So it's fairly easy to specify what each of them needs and then copy it across the various houses. So that's the stage we're at. That's we've specified what each house needs. And we have 13 homes which have said they want to go ahead with this. So now we've contacted 4 suppliers, 4 well-known reputable suppliers, and we're awaiting quotes back from them, which we expect to get next week. They've all promised that they'd give us the quotes next week, and then we'll have a final meeting. Well, I'll have a final meeting with those people who are interested, and then basically it's over to them to actually, action it. But it's something that, to be honest, it's easier to do in a way in Santry than it might be in some of the areas in North City Dublin. But it is still possible to do. It's just the replicability of it in this estate with 350 homes makes it a bit easier in Santry. So I'll keep you informed about how that goes. I suppose the advantage that people find with it is that they're learning a lot I mean, I've done a few sessions with them. I've done 3 sessions with them basically to kind of educate them in what solar is about, how much it costs, how much you can save, you know, how much panels generate depending on which way they're facing, south, east, west, north, whatever. So they're learning a lot. So it means that when a supplier is talking to them, you know, they can understand what they're saying to them, as opposed to it being kind of gobbledygook. And I think that they find that a big advantage to this solar nail idea. So that's me. Thanks for listening. I'll hand you back to Jer.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, everyone. We're coming to the end of our talk now. So we'll just go through some questions in the chat. So I think the questions have been answered as we've gone along, which is very efficient by our speakers. So the first question was by Sally and Kieran, and that was if the solar panels had an effect on the BER. And Celine was saying that they haven't checked the BER since, but they think it's between the panels and the installations probably likely to be a C1, and remember that's going up from an E1, so that's a significant improvement. A question from Brian Kerr. So gas post solar reduction, is that because of the water heating with the eddy? And Celine was saying there that it could be a combination of the hot water and then also increased insulation and then behavioral change as well. Because as she mentioned, the more we kind of view our electricity usage, the more we realize that are we using it as efficiently as we can. Scott Bryan had a question about units, and there's no reference to kilowatts on his bill. And he correctly assumed that 1 unit equals 1 kilowatt. So Christina Casey had a question on red brick period houses and if there's solar panels on the front. And Celine was saying that Jerry's panels in Shandon are on the front. So I think with the planning permission requirements being removed as well, you can put them on the front. But I don't know if it's a special area conservation, if that adds an extra layer of difficulty to it. Scott was saying that he films his new water butt when it rains. That's great. I think that was in response to Michelle saying she sits there and watches the meter turn backwards, which is brilliant. Aisling Ryan had a question about, did anyone take into consideration the investment payback and potentially moving and selling the house in the future? And Owen Condren responded, yes, absolutely. It can also reduce a mortgage in 2 ways, by reducing the loan to value and by bringing the BER to a level that unlocks a green mortgage rate. Sorka Brennan was saying, interesting that Michelle put her panels against both boundaries, but Owen was told he couldn't. I think they look good against the boundary, and as Owen said, it seems a waste not to go to the roof boundary. Any clarification on what is allowed? So I don't think that question has been answered yet. Or Owen?
Yeah, so I just had a quick look. So yeah, in the section 6 of SEI's, grant application overview, there's a planning section, and it says that the solar panels shall be a minimum of 50 centimeters from any edge of the wall or roof on which it is to be mounted. Now, whether that was misinterpreted by our installers as including the boundary of the roof, which is adjacent, which one could interpret as the same roof, I don't know. But anyway, that was that's how they went. But the boundary is in the photo is a bit misleading because the color of the tiles change, not on the boundary, but a bit further over. So we're actually closer than the boundary than it looks in the photo. But anyway, that's the rule. Yeah.
Just I think that as far as I was aware, the boundary issue was a fear of a wind problem, that the wind could get under the panels if they're too close to the edge of the roof. So if you see there that your panels there are 500 mil away from, if you had them right up to the edge of the roof, just over the gutter, I think there's a fear that wind would get under them or wherever. And I think that's the reason for the 500 mil, but I'm not sure.
But he definitely did measure from 500 mil from the neighbor, from the right hand side in the picture as well as the left. Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
And so yeah, if it were shifted over a bit, you could probably get 2 more on. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, Stephanie Dickinson's sister has 7 on the exact same roof across the street. Caldor did that one. I mean, there's north facing, so they have it on the front, and you can so I don't know. I drew the short straw maybe on that one. But, yeah.
Yep. I think that's a really good point though, because like I think the purpose of this and what I'm finding out, because I'm in the midst of my own renovation project, is that the more you know, the more beneficial it is. You know, like this is like, and you can learn from our experiences here. You know, so you can ask about that. You can get out your measuring tape and hop up on the roof and see if it's 50 centimeters away. If you can squeeze in more panels. Okay, thanks for that, Owen and Jer. So Kevin had a question next about did anyone install or consider installing a microinverter for their solar PV system. So I think Celine got back to Kevin on that and said they have a micro diverter. So I don't know if that answers the question, and if it doesn't, I'll post our email addresses into the chat, and you can email us, and we'll be able to get back to you after this presentation. Steve, did anyone have issues with chimneys? I was told a few years ago that shade from chimneys would stop some of the gains to the solar panels, and Celine answered this again, that Steve, optimizers help that. So Celine, what are optimizers?
Jerry got them on his. They're actually, they if you have a chimney overlooking a tree, they somehow or other optimize the sun that's coming down, and maybe this George can probably address it better, but maybe they can angle the sun slightly differently, or use themselves to angle it to actually reflect on the PV panels better, something like that.
It's slightly different than that. So basically,
I was just guessing there, Jared, so I have no idea. Yeah.
No problem. So basically, the problem is that normally the way they're wired, the panels, they're wired the way they're normally wired. If one of the panels is shaded, it affects all of the panels.
Oh yeah, that's it.
So right. if the say on Owen's roof there, if for instance that the sun was coming from behind the chimney and they were affecting that panel up on the top right hand panel, that would affect the output. So maybe the top right hand panel, it's 20% shaded. Well, in effect, that would reduce the electricity from all the panels by 20%. And what the optimizers do is they prevent that happening. It confines the shadow problem to just the panel that is being shadowed. Does that make sense?
And I actually read that earlier and forgot. Thank you, Jared.
Sorry, Celine, for putting you on the spot there. Thanks, Chair, for that. So Kevin asked just again, I think, Celine, how was it much of an additional cost for the micro diverter?
From what I look at on my bill, it doesn't appear to be, but I said I would send him I can send him the invoice if he wants, if he gives us his email address.
Yeah, brilliant.
It's typically 500 extra for a diverter. Whether you're diverting to a car, or whether you're diverting to a hot water or something, it's about 500 quid-ish.
Okay, great. And yeah, so for anyone who has follow-up questions, we posted our emails into the chat there, so we'd be delighted to answer any of the questions. So there's another question here I think for Jared. Is there any limit on the size of the system if seeking the grant?
There used to be a limit of 6 kilowatts. I can't remember if that's still there, but 6 kilowatts would be 15 panels. That's a hell of a lot of panels. So, you know, but sorry, just bear in mind that you'll only get a grant up to 4 kilowatt peak. After that, you won't be getting any further grants.
Okay, great stuff. And then we have two questions on the same I guess like preparatory work, something that can get lost when you talk about energy retrofitting. So do you need a good electricity system? So bought an old house recently, I'm not sure how well wired it is. And then similarly that was from Maeve, and then from Linda, do old electrics rule you out? So that might be a question for Jer.
Yeah, I would say no, because basically they don't interact with your existing electrics. It just goes straight to your electricity meter. So if your electricity meter is able to take the power from the grid, it should be able to take the power back from the grid, or back from you as well. So I would say no, even if your wiring isn't great, it won't interfere with your existing wiring. It only goes straight to your meter. So no, not a problem.
Oh, that's great. I would have thought the opposite.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And so then Scott had a question. So when you get a quote for, say, 10 panels generating a max of 3.2 kilowatts, what is the 3.2 kilowatts referring to? Is it the 10 panels can generate a maximum 3.2 kilowatts per hour, or what?
So that means that you've got panels that are 320 watts peak each. So that means on a very sunny day on June the 21st at 12 o'clock in the day, you're going to get 3.2 kilowatts of power from then, as long as the sun shines brightly. Because that's 10 by 320. I would say now that nowadays 320 watt panels, I wouldn't recommend using 320 watt panels because you can get 400 and 440 watt. Even though the 320 watt panels will be cheaper, if you're going to put them up, you know, you're better off putting up high wattage panels because actually, in actual fact, a lot of the money isn't actually in the panels. Most of the cost, or a high percentage of the cost, is in getting people up onto your roof and getting an electrician to connect it up. The panels themselves are only about 200 quid each, give or take. So, but actually getting the panels up there and getting them located, getting them secure, getting people to be climbing across, getting people to deliver scaffolding, getting people to put up scaffolding, getting people to climb up the scaffolding, getting people to take down the scaffolding, getting the electrician to wire it up. That's a very big part of where the work is. So you're better off, in my view, putting up high wattage panels rather than thinking that you're saving money putting up lower wattage panels.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chair. And then Ruth Hegarty had a question as well. Is there zero risk of damage to the roof tiles creating a leak?
I wouldn't say there's zero risk, but I mean, these systems have been put up all over Europe. You know, these are the panels, and they're using the same systems that are installed all over Europe and all over the world, actually. So there's not zero risk. Anybody, when people stand on your roof, you know, there's a risk that they could crack some of the tiles, and there could be a tiny little, you know, fracture, which could give you a problem down the line. But I would say the level of risk is relatively small, as long as the people who are doing the work know what they're doing and they're a reputable company and they're not cowboys.
And I know, and just to add on to that point, I know in my personal experience, there was a couple of solar companies that I dealt with that have teams of roofers as well. And then just to go back on why Michelle had to get the breather membrane in as well. This will help prevent leaks as well. The breather membrane is just like a fabric that goes underneath the roof instead of that like bitumen tar felt that they used to do back in the 70s and 80s. So that'll help prevent leaks as well. But as we said, yeah, there's no such thing as zero risk with these kind of things, but they're up everywhere. Okay, so just I think I'm conscious we're 7 minutes over time, so last few questions. So Brian Kerr again, do you have to explicitly ask for optimizer setup?
Yeah, you would have to ask them, but well, they'll probably suggest it. I think if there is a shadow issue, if depending on what's over, if there's a tree, like for instance, if there's a tree in the front garden and your garden is pointing south, for instance, they'll probably suggest optimizers to you. But you should ask them the question, you know, do I have shadow issues? And if so, can you sort it with optimizer, and how much would it cost?
Great. Seamus Galvin. Seamus has a question about the angle stands for placing the solar panels on flat roofs. Any idea how much more expensive they would be?
No, but Owen, you used angle stands, didn't you, there on the flat roof?
I did, yeah. They're just like plastic bins cast, you know, kind of shaped like the bucket on the front of a bulldozer sort of thing, or you know, one of those diggers, and yeah, they just sit in there. I was expecting like metal frames or something, but no, they're literally plastic bins with two concrete blocks inside for weight, and then the panels just clip onto the perimeter of the, you know, onto the mouth of the bin. That's it. Very simple. I don't think or know if there was any extra cost. I wasn't aware. If it was, I think it was fairly negligible, I guess, because it's displacing the cost of the brackets to go on the roof. It seems like the installation on the flat roof is a lot more simple because they're literally just laid down and wired together, rather than having to, you know, remove tiles and hook onto the joists and whatever, the rafters. I mean, yeah.
Great. So then we'll just have, I think, just 2 or 3 more questions here, and then we'll wrap it up. So what's the average lifespan of a PV panel? I think it is.
So they last, I would say, at least 20 years typically. But they do degrade over time. They degrade about 1% per annum typically. So in other words, in 20 years' time, there'll be 20% less power. You get 20% less out of them than you get now. You know, and in 10 years' time, you get about 10 up to. So I think actually on the SCAI, I think for the installers, I think it's specified in the guidance from SCAI that they have to be at least 80% as powerful after 20 years. So there's a max of 1% degradation per year. And they last at least 20 years, maybe 25.
Brilliant. And then Brian Kerr had any recommendations on the regularity of getting panels cleaned to keep them efficient?
Yeah, I would say you don't have to clean them very often. It rains a lot in Ireland, so, and you know, if they're up on now you might, if they're on a flat roof, they might need to be cleaned more. But then if they're on a flat roof, they're probably very accessible. But on a 35-degree roof, which are typically the roofs in Dublin are 35-degree slope, you know, that the rain washes them well enough, you know.
Brilliant.
Not very often, I'd say.
Okay, great stuff. Letting nature do the work for us. That's always good.
Mm.
So then Ruth had just, and this last question. So there's some asbestos roof tiles out there. So is this a factor that anyone's come across?
Well, asbestos is, yeah, asbestos could cause a problem. People won't like, you know, nobody likes working with asbestos because you can get kind of a lung cancer out of it. So I don't know, I wouldn't know enough about it, but I know people are very wary of asbestos roof tiles.
Mm. I think just in general terms, because we did an asbestos survey in our house. I think it cost a couple of £100 or a few £100, but then it's the peace of mind. If there's asbestos in the house, it's a good thing to get resolved. So I'm just conscious that it's getting late. It's 20 to 9. Thank you all so much for coming along. I'd like to thank all our wonderful resident speakers as well for coming on and sharing their experiences. And then thank you to all of you who joined as well. We hope we made things a little clearer. We'll be sending around an email with all the slides, and keep an eye out on our socials and our Eventbrite for our next community event. We'll hopefully be doing these monthly at a mix of in-person and virtual as well, to try and demystify things when it comes to energy and electricity. So just keep an eye out, and thanks very much, folks. Brilliant.
Thanks a lot, Chair, for hosting. Appreciate it.